Welcome back. Welcome back, everybody, to our police commission meetings after a 2-month absence. I would like to begin. Is there anybody out there for public comment? Raise your hand.
I don't see anyone.
Okay. If everyone get an opportunity to review the agenda. What I want to do, because we've been gone for 2 months, is I just want to read our mission statement. I want to kind of go back through that again so we're all on the exact same page. The Eugene Police Commission recommends to the City Council, City Manager, Police Department, and the people the resources, preferred policy alternatives, policies, and citizen responsibilities needed to achieve a safe community. We strive to create a climate of mutual respect and partnership between the community and the police department that helps to achieve safety, justice, and freedom for all in Eugene. So let's read that. And so we just kind of remember what we do here on the police commission. Like we've done in previous meetings, I'd like to kind of remind us, I know it's been 2 months as far as the last meeting recap. So on the last meeting, which was in July, we had AIC Deputy Chief, he did a report. We also had CAHOOTS program review. We went over excuse me? Sorry about that. We went over CAHOOTS program review. We had went over and completed and the de-escalation policy 820 with changes. And we went through we reviewed the mutual aid policy 107. So before we get into any of our reports, we have a vacancy. We have 2 vacancies for police commission. So commissioners Maisie Davis and Chantel Robertson are no longer with us. I'm going to have Commissioner Shivers, who heading up our search committee, kind of give us a little brief where we're at as far as what's been going on with us. Sean?
Yeah, thank you, Dallas. So we managed to interview 4 of the 5 applicants that we received. We had some outstanding talent come out this time. I was very nervous considering these outside of the normal hours application processes tend to be hit or miss in terms of how many applicants we get. But after interviewing the 4 of them, we recommended 2 to Mayor Vinnis. We were comfortable doing so rather than extending the application deadline in hopes of additional applicants because the pool was so outstanding. So it's on Mayor Vinnis's, I believe it's on her desk right now. The Holly might be correct me with that one. If not, it's headed her way, and she will make the final decision on who to recommend, and then City Council will actually make the appointment. So that's where it's standing now. I don't want to put my thumb too heavily on the scale in case the mayor does decide to go a different way, but the 2 that we recommended are Silky Booker and Jensina. I'm afraid I've forgotten her last name, and I don't have my notes up right now. Hawkins. Thank you so much. So those 2 are the ones that we've recommended to Mayor Vinnis, and hopefully she carries that through, and it's a pretty smooth process from here.
Thank you. And I want to thank yourself, Commissioner Dominguez, Commissioner Silverio, and Holly, because I was checking down how many times we've met, including the interview process, and that was 5 times. So thank you so much for your time and your efforts, and we move on. Next, we'll be going into liaison reports. So I will start off with Commissioner Lemon.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, it's been a little while since we've met, but the numbers that the Human Rights Commission is worried about is bias, incidents, and crimes, which we had, I think I had only reported 7 to 8 all the way up until our last meeting, and we've had 10 since. So Lieutenant Dalton had to go pretty quickly, but so there was an arrest in July at the Lane County Fair. Couple of teens damaged property. There was a perception that it was because of the LGBTQ element within the incident. It was also referred to DHS because the parents were involved. So that there was an arrest made there. There was also an arrest with a man at a hotel and who seemed intoxicated. Made very anti-homo sexual slurs, and so anyways, they were able to clear that pretty quickly because it was all on camera. There is an open case about an assault that is interpreted as racially motivated, and then there was a bias crime and incident, vandalism to a son's car window, specifically targeting their race. And then there was another arrest right before the meeting, I think, and that was a female using racial slurs, specifically anti-Asian slurs, but was doing so in an alley and was stalking the person. So it escalated to an arrest versus an incident. And there's an ongoing case, but I can't really, or Lieutenant Dalton, therefore I can't comment too much on it because they don't know if it's going to be a domestic violence incident or if it's going to be like a hate and bias incident. So it's we're concerned about the trend going a little higher. But that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lehman.
Thank you, Commissioner. The Civilian Review Board met this week. There are no official transmittal communications from the board to this body, and we are looking forward to hearing the interim auditor's report this evening to this commission, which will update you on what her office has been doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Ye.
Yeah, I don't think I have much except to remind folks that council had a work session on alternative responses. We're working with some consultants. They are not done, so I would say stay tuned for their final report and recommendations. The meeting, if you do go and watch it, centers primarily on the work they've done so far around cahoots. And she gives a little bit, or they give a little bit of information on how they feel we can use the resource better to target their skills, so that they're going to those calls that require those skills, and we're not sending them to lower need calls that is essentially wasting the skills that we're paying for. Does that sound about right? Yeah. And you know, they found some gaps, but they want to wait till they're finished and give us the full report. So they were just kind of checking in. And that's on the website if you want to watch it.
Great, thank you. Vice Chair Dominguez.
I've got nothing to say. Thank you.
Commissioner Wynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've noticed an increase in, drivers that are speeding through my neighborhood. Definitely not going 20 miles per hour, more likely 35, 40 miles per hour sometimes. Yeah, it's gotten to the point where my neighbors are screaming at drivers going by, speeding by. I doubt they hear it. Yeah, I think what happened is, the neighborhood association did put together a request for traffic, I guess, assessment to see if there are, a lot of drivers going through past the speed limit. And the report has been that, you know, there are a lot of speeders going through, but unfortunately, we are tabled through to 2023, I think. That's when the city might do something about it by adding some kind of speed bump or traffic devices to help with that. Anyway, it's really, really bad. You know, when I go out walking, I always have my flashlight now that it's getting darker earlier and earlier. I really strongly recommend people doing that so that, you know, hopefully the drivers can see you when you cross the road. Okay, that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Mogart?
He's having difficulty getting logged in.
Okay, I'll go back to
I've
him.
been communicating with him.
Commissioner Shivers?
Yeah, so I might be a little bit late to next meeting is the only thing I have to say. I meant to say it before the meeting, but I got distracted by a call. Other than that, I'm excited to hear the auditor's report, and yeah, thank you all.
Mr. Winbrow?
Yeah, I just have a couple of things. Saw some of our uniformed officers on motorcycle today without masks, and my heart just went out for them. They were riding around with really poor air quality. So yeah, just don't know if that's just a lot more comfortable on a motorcycle, but just know that when I was, you know, walking around when the air quality was in the 200s, it was rough on my lungs. Can't imagine with how much tougher it would have been to be out there for a number of hours. Would keep getting inquiries from community members about the ad hoc committee on police policies recommendations, getting a status update on the matrix and the July the 5th meeting. So definitely want to be able to kind of direct them to resources online that show the follow through and direction that council's taking, but just don't know what resources to direct them towards. And then also, this happens every couple of weeks. But I always gently push back on people that talk about, you know, the chief has quotas or that we have arrest quotas. And I, you know, buy him coffee and we sit down, we look at the data. But what I would really love to do is to be able to like showcase the, you know, on my own time, go into the data and like show that, you know, there's no statistically significant sample that showcases on a Tuesday, you're more likely to arrest people than on a Friday, or on, you know, December Saturday, you're more likely to arrest people than a July Saturday. So I don't know kind of functionally what I can do as a commission member to gently push back on that, because I don't want people to not be engaged or come to commissioners with questions. But at the same time, if anyone else here has kind of effective ways to engage with that or data sources to be able to showcase to people, I would love to hear it, because it's something that keeps coming up, talking about the quotas of our police department or any police department. And it's just a perennial conversation. And I'm wondering how other folks have effectively been able to engage with community members while not making them feel like they want to disengage, because I don't want to lessen people's interest in policing, nor feel like I'm dismissing them wholesale because of their comments.
Well, for one, I would just suggest that any of those type of questions, I might not necessarily have the answer, but you could send an email to me and I would forward it to Holly and to try to get the answer. That's the one thing. That's the one thing that that would be the first start.
Great, thanks.
Yeah. Okay. If anyone has been or has looked at the news, it has seemed, in my opinion, an uptick in crimes, incidents, people getting accosted and so forth downtown. So I thought it might be a good opportunity to have the chief give us a little bit of an update as far as the downtown presence, the whys, what's going on, and what is our goals there. So without further ado, I'll let him explain what's going on with the downtown police uptick in presence.
Thank you, Chair Boggs. I'll do my best to try and explain. I mean, it's always hard to fully explain why people are behaving the way that they are behaving. other than to say that we seem to have abandoned all coping mechanisms in this with some people on how they deal with conflict, and we're starting to see that happening. The downtown has seen an uptick in some lawlessness and some more violent crime. It has been mostly on the weekends as a result of some of the drinking that's happening downtown, and it kind of spills out into the street and the bars from the bars. Lots of more than usual weapons, both guns and knives being used with these individuals. The one piece that is consistent is it's not random. We're not seeing random people be assaulted necessarily, especially this group in the evenings on the weekends. It's not random. It's people that know each other that are in conflict with each other. So we've had everything from you looked at my girlfriend the wrong way that ended up in a shooting to what we determined was a narcotics sale that went wrong that ended up in a stabbing, to just arguing. And because both parties are so intoxicated, they can't make good decisions, it ends up in some kind of an assaultive behavior. The area that we've been really focusing on has been in that Broadway and Olive area. Mostly the bars that are right there have catered to different crowds on the weekends, and they, you know, as you can imagine, at 2 a.m. they, you know, everybody's kind of getting out at the same time, everybody's converging onto the street. Our presence there over the last several weekends has really helped matters, and we've been doing some joint work with OLCC, which is Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission, and walking through the bars and looking for visibly intoxicated people, checking for who's been overserved, and just having more of a presence downtown where they see us, and it has curbed some of that on the weekends for sure. We were wanting to do something a little bit different because we had students coming back in late September. We've seen this uptick in crime downtown. We know those students go downtown. The one real nuance that is interesting from our intelligence is some of the people that we're dealing with aren't even from here. They're coming into town from the Portland metro area to come down. There's some conflict with some local people here that seems to be kind of going on. And I'm not going to get into a bunch of details because we do have some active investigations. But our special investigation unit, which is that unit that does all of that intelligence gathering and undercover work, has got a significant couple of significant leads on some bad actors in our community that we're going to be taking some action on. And I'll kind of leave it at that because I don't want to tip my hand on some stuff. So we're paying attention, lots of presence, lots of overtime work downtown, especially on the weekends, working with OLCC, working with the Department of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. In the event that we seize weapons, we're able to test fire those weapons and run that the results against our national database to see if those weapons have been used in other violent crimes. And then, of course, the downtown team that's paying attention to that. We're communicating with downtown business owners of these venues. We're communicating with OLCC. So we're feeling fairly optimistic that we got our arms kind of around that particular problem. Now, downtown's a different animal during the daytime than it is at nighttime, and there's still issues we need to address. One of the things that just had a meeting with the city manager about an hour ago, and we're going to pull some people together. One of the things that in my one-on-ones with council members, I talk about is the complexity of the downtown core, the overlay of all of the different boundaries that seem to have different rules, make it really difficult to police. And it makes it difficult for patrons to know what the rules are downtown. And so simplifying that would be helpful to identify, okay, what do we really want to protect in the downtown core as far as behavior? Should it extend and capture some of the Fifth Street market? Should it extend all the way to the river to protect our new investment and the riverfront? And then have one set of rules for that whole area. Because right now, if I showed you a map of downtown boundaries, it's got like 4 different colors and different shapes and different rules, and we need to simplify that for everybody that's involved. So we're going to do that, or at least we're going to propose that we do that. And then there's a couple of things we can do downtown from an environmental design perspective, to make it a little bit safer, a little bit of a capital investment on closing off some areas and identifying those areas where we've noticed that people have a tendency to congregate, kind of hide in the shadows. Some bad behavior happening with patrons that are coming out of certain bars downtown because people are able to kind of sneak around and not be seen and engage in that harassing behavior. So I think there's some environmental design that we can do to help with that. So all of those things are, downtown related that we're going to be trying to pay attention to and doing that. But we're 3 weeks in on an specific operation around downtown on the weekends, and it seems to be helping so far. So that's the downtown report.
Commissioner Chivers.
Yeah, thank you, Dallas. And thank you, Chief. I just wanted to point out, particularly for our new commissioners, that this body recommended the exact kind of changes that Chief Skinner is talking about almost a year ago. So I don't think Councilor Zelinka is here tonight, but what he told us at the time was that, oh, that's probably not going to happen because we have bigger priorities. Well, we're seeing the result of that. If we tackled this a year ago when we first talked about it, we wouldn't be talking about it again. So I don't know whether it wastes more time to make small, simple fixes or bring the same problem up again and again and again. I'd rather just solve the problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lemon.
Thank you, Chair. And honestly, thank you, Chief, for focusing on downtown. I work downtown. I lived downtown for 15 years. And of course, this is my personal opinion, but it's gone significantly downhill. So I really appreciate you focusing on it. I would like to point out that honestly, a significant amount of the crimes that do happen downtown are not as random as they may be. Of course, during the bar hours, they might be. But when I was living downtown, I finally escaped it 9 months ago. And I mean escape, but there was a random just roundhouse kick right in front of my apartment building to my face. Unprovoked, thought the guy was sleeping, just walked by him. And there was also this guy that was just randomly stalking me to the point where my employer had to pay for the local downtown security, the Red Hats, to escort me to and from my car for 6 months until he committed a crime significant enough to land him in prison. So that was a huge thing, not just for me, but for my organization, which is a local nonprofit. They don't have the money to do that. And lastly, speaking of local, I'm sure they're not nonprofit, but the Red Hats have been absolutely amazing. Downtown security, I don't know if the Eugene police have the capacity. I would like to hear about that, or hear from you about that. But what is your position on increasing contractors to take care of some of the lower need calls and working with partners that we've worked with obviously for a long time? Thank you.
So a couple of comments to that. The first thing I'd say is that when I made the comment that the daytime is different than the nighttime downtown, that alludes to some of the stuff you're talking about, Scott, with regards to some of that behavior. If you talk to the downtown and you're lucky because you have a former sergeant who spent, I don't know how many years downtown that could speak to this. But if I went to the downtown folks right now, they would probably give me 12 or 15 names of people that are in and around the downtown that if they weren't there, the downtown would seem so much safer. The sad part about it, and the sad reality is those 12 or 15 people are so mentally ill that they need help that this state and this county has not been able to provide for them. And so there's no place for them to be. Jail is not where they should be. And so that's why the stabilization center is so important, so that we have a place to take people that shouldn't be sitting in a jail cell that are mentally ill. They actually can get stabilized. But really, this is a kind of an editorial on how we continue to build a really good system that functions as an emergency room, and we have not invested in the hospital, so to speak, around the emergency room where people can go to get well. So we're really good at crisis response, not so good at a path to wellness. And you see that from a variety of people downtown, especially during the daytime. The nighttime crowd, the bar crowd, mostly a different crowd, mostly a different purpose for being downtown. And that has been where we've seen the uptick in violence that we're talking about and being able to do that. With respect to the downtown resources, may not feel like this, but for the downtown, it is the most, it's the highest resourced area of the city with respect to the number of officers that are assigned in that area, downtown ambassadors, red hats, private security, and all of that stuff. Could they be working more efficiently together? Absolutely. Do we need to constantly be thinking about how we do things differently downtown? Absolutely. And what I would say is, as we bring more of our community service officers on, it's our intent to assign at least a couple of those community services officers to the downtown. They provide a good presence. They provide a good alternative response. They can respond to lower acuity calls that don't need necessarily an armed police response. We can send somebody else that has some investigative techniques and some ability to do that to meet those needs. So we're constantly looking at ways that we can resource downtown and do that without just throwing police officers at the problem.
Okay, well, thank you, Chief. And I would just want to shout out the Red Hats again and how amazing they have been working downtown. And then lastly, on your comment about environmental design, I think that's amazing that Eugene Police Department is thinking about that. Is there any way that I or the commission can help further that?
Thanks for that question, Scott. I'm going to answer that with I don't know yet, because most of those environmental designs are capital improvements that involve public works and facilities. And so we'll be making some of those recommendations, and we'll let it go through the government, the municipal process, and see if we can get to a place where we can do that. But if I need some leverage, I'll certainly reach out.
We can also, as individual citizens, always go and give testimony at the Planning Commission.
Commissioner Wimbrot.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to shout out Sergeant Smith. She was kind enough when she was downtown to walk me during the daytime with her little policy handbook. And I haven't forgotten, Sergeant Smith, you patiently buying me coffee and walking me from park to street and kind of explaining the delineations of the boundaries and how these overlays interplayed with each other, and how you had to be part police officer, part social scientist, part policy wonk to be able to navigate the complex dynamics that overlay with one another. And I just wanted to dovetail off of what Sean just shared. Not as police commissioners, as individual citizens, we can talk to council members and advocate for the prioritization of council really looking at the interplay of these areas downtown. And additionally to what you were talking about, Scott, there's a lot of different ways that community members downtown or organizations downtown can advocate for small changes, which in the aggregate might make a big difference. The work that the Arts and Culture Division of the city's Parks, Recreation, and Arts Department is doing to be able to create pro-social environments that bring kind of the right people downtown, and not just using things that antagonize the wrong people, but really co-create a culture and community downtown, could be part of the way that we can work together to be able to create an environment downtown which is more amenable to the type of safety that we all want to feel. We tried that in the Whitaker by using street murals that were funded by the CDC to be able to create environments that both slowed down traffic and brought in more people using public art. And then in addition beyond that, I just want to say to any commissioner, I did 2 walk-alongs in the downtown beat, one in the daytime and one at night. And to the chief's comments, I really saw the stark difference between the two. And I can imagine that almost every fall, this is probably a perennial problem that the department has got a good handle on, and the ebb and flow probably follows a firm set of patterns. So in the Whitaker, what we did is rally together as a community for a perennial offender that obviously needed help. And we worked with Lane County Health and Human Services to make sure that this individual got the assistance that they needed at the state hospital. So it was really burdensome, but there just was nobody there, and they fell through the cracks. And this individual, we know, has been someone who used social services a lot, who EPD and the community service officers and our beat officers knew really well too. So it's painful to say that sometimes individual residents need to step up. But in the absence of the type of resources that the chief is talking about, I've found that community groups creating projects that improve the built environment and create a pro-social environment to bring people to public spaces, because they get a lot more comfortable and safe when there's more people actively using them. And then in the same vein, if there's individuals who are repeat offenders, folks coming together and working with social service providers to make sure that they can navigate the system effectively. That's the only thing in like the 4+ years that I've lived here, I've seen for folks who need services desperately, be able to have access to them, even though we don't have enough resources to serve everyone we need to, in the ways that I feel like a lot of us want folks to be able to have access.
Thank you. Judge Lehman?
Thank you, Chair. I just would say that when you talk about environmental engineering in the downtown core, I just get nervous that this trend in urban architecture that's anti homeless or unhoused, you know, the spikes and the benches that you can't sit on and things like that. And I just, when I hear the talk of that kind of engineering, we've already seen boulders and under the underpasses and that kind of thing. And I just want to be alert to that that's not necessarily a solution that the city would find consensus around. So, and I don't suggest the chief was suggesting that's what he had in mind, just that when you talk about that kind of engineering, that you're getting there. So thank you.
I have a question, and I want to, this is for Sergeant Smith. And this was only because I know you had you were involved in the downtown and so forth. It's just a question. When you're coming across a person that that's mentally ill, what resources do you know of that, what are we doing with that person?
Well, we work really, at least when I was downtown, we worked really closely with Cahoots. We actually had a crisis team amongst the downtown team that we utilized to connect those individuals with the social services. And so there is a really good close connection between Cahoots and actually some of the other programs that are available to help with some of the, I want to say, use the word repeat offender, but people that utilize the services, in fact, more often than others, the Fuse program and et cetera. So in fact, the other day, I just got a phone call from somebody from Fuse that wanted to use my assistance to help find some clients that they really needed to get in touch with. And so even though I was retired, I still assisted with that. And so there's a close relationship there. And the other thing I just want to kind of, I guess, remind people of is that over the last 5 years, the city has significantly invested in the downtown. I think that there was money that went towards helping to increase the amount of lighting downtown, lighting up the alleyways, and some of the streets so that it made it safer for people, especially, you know, this time of year as it starts to get dark at 6 o'clock at night, people are leaving work. And so through environmental designs, those are the things that are taken into consideration. So anyway, there's things that we have done. There's still things that need to be done. And, you know, prioritizing with resources with funding is usually some of the roadblocks. But I hope that answers some of the questions. I don't, you know.
Hey, y'all, just a heads up that we lost you for a hot second there. This is Ian, by the way. So Holly's run off to get the computer charger. We can still hear y'all here. But we just lost you for a quick second there, Sergeant Smith, after you mentioned working to improve the built environment, specifically around getting some more supports for the infrastructure around lighting improvements.
Yeah, so I think that those are, and the chief mentioned there are still some things in the work, and they are in the agenda for the city manager's office and facilities that are still working towards that.
Thanks so much. Chair, it looks like we have Commissioner Lemon who
Yes,
has
go
their-
ahead, Commissioner Lemon.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I wanted just a tiny bit of clarifying about what environmental design is. Is it solely lighting, and is it strategies to keep unhoused people away? Or could we use these spaces to actually create housing? So I'm sorry to come a little uneducated on that one, but I would like a little clarification.
Chief, did you want to answer that? Crime prevention through environmental design, or did you want me to kind of touch on that?
Why don't you touch on it, Sergeant Smith? Sorry, I'm a poor Zoom facilitator, trying my best right now.
Yeah, so I mean, the term is crime prevention through environmental design, and it's exactly that, is like evaluating an area for lighting and what can we do to, in fact, I worked really closely with cultural services. We decided over the last few years where we were programming the space for positive events that were occurring in those spaces, so that there were positive things that would attract everybody that was in the space to enjoy the space together. So, over the last 20 years, there have been experiments about removing benches, putting benches in, changing how downtown looks, fencing things, unfencing things. And so at least that the last time I worked and before I left the downtown, the focus was creating positive spaces and programming those areas so that everybody could feel welcomed and enjoy the space together, and not to ostracize one group of individuals over another.
Okay, so we're not talking about spikes or anything along those lines.
Nope.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it.
Now, I want to go right back to my question. From what you've told me is if a person had mental illness, basically that person would get turned over to Cahoots. Now, how long does that person stay with Cahoots?
I think it's going to vary from individual to individual, because it's such an individual basis. Everybody has their own story and how and what is affecting their behaviors. I think that the city and Cahoots has a good connection with the programs that are available for each individual, and it's all about getting them connected and the follow through to get them to those appointments so that they can actually get the help that they need.
So would Cahoots take the person maybe to the mental illness place in Junction City?
No.
What? Well, the Junction City facility is not open for us to take individuals there. That's individuals there are assigned from the state of Oregon. But what Cahoots does take some individuals to their appointments. Heck, I even took some individuals to their appointments. It's all about connecting them, not only connecting with the services, but getting them in to where they're actually in touch with them. And so it was creative. It takes resources and it takes everybody working together.
The state of Oregon ranks dead last in this country in mental health investment. The people that Sergeant Smith's talking about are the people that are on the fringe. The people that I'm talking about are the ones that are chronically, seriously mentally ill that have no place to go. There's no services for them, no inpatient services for them. And the city of Eugene continues to talk about us having a role in that. And the bottom line is that Dane County Behavioral Health is the mental health provider for our county, not the city of Eugene. So we're constantly trying to partner with the county on how we can expand those services. The stabilization center is a good example of that, which they're going to be citing that pretty soon. It's going to be a couple of years before that thing's built, but that's what this community needs, is a place that we can actually physically take people and take them somewhere so that they can get stabilized and think about a path to wellness. Junction City is not an option, and the Oregon State Hospital is not an option. We're seeing fewer and fewer people being sent there as a result of judges' orders for mental health, for the police officer custodies that we take, or the police officer holds we have. It's just, we're just really, really struggling with a lack of mental health services in the state. And if there's one common denominator to what we're feeling downtown, and quite frankly across this community, is we have a ton of people that are mentally ill and a ton of people that are substance addicted or both, and very few resources for those folks. It gets really frustrating for police officers and anybody that's working in this field, because it just feels like it's rinse, repeat every day, same people with no resources. So if there's an investment to be made, it's going to be made in addiction services and mental health, that's for sure.
Commissioner Lemon?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much, Chief Skinner, for understanding exactly what's going on. I work in the nonprofit field in the mental health specifically area, and we are completely overwhelmed. There's no way that we can achieve this huge goal of helping everybody with the amount of funding that we get and how hard it is to get that funding. I wanted to point out that Cahoots is doing their absolute best to serve who they can. There's a lot of calls that Cahoots will not be able to show up to just due to their capacity. They are also one of the most underpaid and overworked people in this profession. And I just want to shout out Cahoots for that one. Obviously, me being on the Cahoots board, I understand how important they are. And then the thing about the rinse and repeat thing is happening two places. It's happening with our prosecutor, and I know that's a county thing, not a city thing, but it's also happening at Peace Health and all of the other mental health places where someone would be committed. Junction City, that is definitely not an option. That's something that is adjudicated by courts, but the police would be able to bring people to the mental or the behavioral health unit at Peace Health if they just had more beds, but they don't, and they don't have the ability to. I'm on their board as well, and they're always looking for ways to find more money and find community support for that, and there just isn't. So the chief is absolutely right there. Cahoots is a triage. They are not. They're amazing. They're caring people, and they do get people to their appointments, but they're not supposed to. They're just a triage person. And when it comes to follow through, I think the average wait time for a counselor is about 6 months right now. So we just have to consider our constraints. We need to definitely reinvest, but I know that's not this commission's charge. But just wanted to say that. Thank you for letting me ramble a little bit about what I care about, but thank you.
Commissioner Wynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to follow up with Scott's comment about, how Cahoot staff are not paid at the wage that they should be paid. Scott, I'm wondering if your analysis of that is based on the living wage. I don't know exactly how much they're getting paid. So I was wondering if you can share a little bit about that. And then secondly, are you noticing, like, you mentioned that you're on the board, right? On Cahoot's board?
I'm on the Cahoots Stewardship Council board, which looks out for the future of Cahoots, but not the day-to-day operations.
Okay, awesome. So then my part two question is there a retention issue with the staffing there due to the wage level? Can you speak to those two questions that I just asked?
So I would say on number 2, I'm gonna have to do it in somewhat vague terms because I
Okay.
asked Cahoots for permission to talk about it.
Yeah.
Number 1, wages at Cahoots, that is just me working in the field, interacting with them all the time. And having some very personal conversations with them. But when you are trained to be a paramedic and a social worker and a counselor, and and you have to be able to defend yourselves and think critically, and you're paid less than most people, honestly. I can't speak to exact numbers because I don't have them in front of me right now, but when you think about the skill set and the amount of college and the amount of extra trainings they went through to do what they're doing, and then they're barely able to make ends meet. That's about all I can comment to that. But that's most of the health and human services field as well. Like when we get in it, that's what we expect. But Cahoots, I think, definitely needs more funding. And then when it comes to the retention issue, I've met several people that are still working in the health and human services field or paramedic field that used to work for Cahoots that just basically realized that they had more value. So not that they disliked the mission statement of Cahoots or their job, but they needed to pay their bills. So that's the answers from my perception to those questions, but that is not an official Cahoots statement.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Do we, and I just wanted to ask, we're almost ready. I just want to ask one quick question. If you don't know the answer, and I'm looking for a long question, and this is for Judge Lehman. Here's my question for you as a former judge. You're telling me that if a person is mentally ill, chronic crazy, and they go to Cahoots, and Cahoots is not qualified to take care of them, they can't go to Junction City?
The state hospital is just that. You're committed by a circuit court judge of the state under a legal standard of being a risk to yourself, of harm to yourself or to others. And I think we're hearing anecdotally that is becoming a rarer event, and there are just an overwhelming number of mentally ill people, and our officers are out there having to deal with them on a daily basis. And Cahoots, no, the comment from one of the commissioners, it's triage. It's to go out there and respond and to prevent, potentially tying up officers and maybe doing something, but it's not a long-term solution. And so there really is no, jail is not the place. A crime has to be committed for jail. And it's a resource issue, no question.
We're going to move on the agenda now. We have, and the chair requests that let the 2 reports be complete. If you have any questions, kind of write those down. And after they finish their report, then we're going to go ahead and ask any questions that we might have. On the police auditor's annual report, the leadership of the police auditor's office is scheduled to appear before the police commission to discuss the 2021 police auditor annual report. Traditionally, the police commission has invited the police auditor's office on an annual basis to share their report. And we have Layla Pritchard. Leah Pritchard.
Hi, Chair Boggs. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, anytime. I'm here most months, but most months I'm lurking, so it's nice to be at the table, I guess. And it's nice to see you all. I know it's been a while since I have been here to report from our office. I'm pretty sure the last time I came, I was alone. So I wanted to bring my staff to introduce them, and also frankly as backup, because I got my COVID booster today and I'm fading quick here, you guys. So I've also been having internet issues tonight, of course. So Rob Eller and Lindsay Foltz are my associate auditors. They came into the office January 4th of this year. So this year has been a lot smoother than last year when Mark retired in February and I was the only auditor until January. So You'll notice some of that in these numbers, and Rob brings extensive investigative experience and Lindsay brings extensive experience in oversight. You may recognize her from her time on Police Commission and also the Civilian Review Board. So I'm very lucky to have them, and I'm grateful that I could bring them with me here tonight. With that, I'm going to go ahead and jump in. Well, first, I do want to say one other thing. Cindy is here to present the IA annual report, the Internal Affairs annual report. And so Cindy and I work really closely together, even though I'm in the independent auditor's office. We share a database. So all the numbers you're about to see are based in the same database. Sometimes we report them a little differently, or we sort of pick them apart a little differently. So if you have questions, we're more than happy to answer those. But just so you know, we actually like share all the same data. And I can talk a little bit more about how all of that works if you guys have questions on it. But I'm going to go ahead and try to share my screen. Here we go. Give me a second. Where's that? There we go. All right, you got a sneak preview there. Can you all hear me still? And can you all see my screen? Just give a wave. Good. Okay, thanks, Alan. Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Scott. Okay, I'll stop thanking everybody. Okay, thank you. Just a grounding for you all. Our mission in the auditor's office is to provide an accessible, safe, impartial, and responsive intake system for complaints against EPD employees, to ensure accountability, fairness, transparency, and trust in the complaint system through the intake, classification, auditing, and adjudication process of the complaint system, and to support and staff the Civilian Review Board. The Civilian Review Board monitors the work of our office. They review closed complaints, and they provide policy recommendations to the police department and to the police commission through our liaison position, which at the moment is Alan. Thank you, Alan. So this is just to show we are completely independent of the rest of city. I see you, of the rest of city government. So as you'll see, the police chief reports to the city manager. I just realized I'm using my mouse as a pointer, and you totally can't see that. So I apologize. I'll stop doing that. But
yeah, you can.
Oh, you can. Oh, thanks. That's good to know. Oh, all right. So all the rest of city government is under the city manager and the assistant city manager. We are one of 3 employees who reports directly to the Eugene City Council. So we are separate from all of the rest of the government, which I think which helps ensure our independence and the independence of our judgment and also of our processes. So to that, our main functions are complaint intake. We are the sole intake point for all, for all complaints against Eugene police employees. Internal complaints can either come to our office or through supervisors at the department, but they all have to come through our office for classification. I'll go into a little bit more about what classifying complaints means in the next slide. But we classify complaints, which means we determine how they're going to get investigated, how they're going to get looked at, how they're going to get followed up on. We monitor those investigations. We make recommendations to the chief about how those complaints should be adjudicated. So whether the investigation shows that the conduct of the officer was within policy or not, essentially. We make recommendations on policy and training, and we report out to the community and support the Civilian Review Board. So last year, it feels a little strange. I'm just going to acknowledge that in October, it feels a little strange to be reporting on the numbers from 2021. But here we are. So we had 289 complaints that we investigated. So 339 complaints total came into our office. 50 of those were dismissed. Typically we dismiss for outside of our jurisdiction, which means it's not an EPD employee. It could be U of O PD, Springfield PD, Parks employees. we get quite a variety these days. Sometimes Cahoots employees. I heard you guys talking about them earlier. We can also dismiss for timeliness, which is defined in city code, which is 60 days for minor misconduct and 6 months for major misconduct. If we don't have enough information to identify the employee, then we'll dismiss. I have to say that's pretty rare. For us, all we really need is is a location and a time. And then pretty much, because with the help of the internal affairs staff, we can identify who may or may not have been involved. Or if there's an alternate remedy available that's more appropriate. So for things like, I got a speeding ticket, but I wasn't speeding, for instance, that's appropriately decided by a court and not so much by our office. So we would tell them to be sure to show up for their court date. And but we would look into things like the officer was rude to me when they pulled me over. So that kind of thing, if that makes sense. This is what I was talking about earlier with classifications. And I see you have a question, Commissioner Shivers, and Chair Boggs, do you want me to wait till the end or do you want me to go with questions now? I'm sorry.
Okay, let's start with this. What's your question, Sean?
I was just going to ask if Leah had broken down the dismissed, like I've asked her in previous annual reports, into where those might have come from, if there's an indication.
As far as, yeah, so I believe that's actually is it in the report this year, Sean?
Dismissed because it was because the complaint came from Springfield or UOPD or private security.
Right.
I didn't see it, but I could have easily missed it.
Well, I could have too, because I wrote it a while ago. So let me, I'll take a note for that. And I might just peek while Cindy is looking, and Cindy actually may be reporting on that. Actually, no, she probably wouldn't. That would be us.
Cool.
Sorry, Cindy, don't mean to throw you under the bus.
Thank you.
But I'll make a note and we'll come back to that, okay?
We'll refrain from any more questions until right after you're done.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, sorry, moving forward. So classification means basically how is it, what is this complaint about? How is it going to get investigated? Our most common are service complaints and policy complaints. So those would be, like I just mentioned, the officer wasn't polite when they pulled me over, or I noticed that you're not responding to my to calls for service for instance, like this year they transitioned to having Public Works respond for parking complaints for people who are parking too long on the streets and camping. So we would get complaints about why is an EPD responding to this person camping on the street? So that kind of thing, that's a policy change, right? So we would make that a policy complaint. Those two types of complaints are assigned to an EPD supervisor for follow-up and a memo. The expectation is that they'll talk to the involved employee, if there is one, talk to the person who complained, try to do some bridging of the gap, and then they write up a memo and let us know what happened. It comes to our office for review, and then it can be closed. Inquiry is kind of similar. Inquiry can be, I saw a situation and I don't know what that was, so I want to know more. But it's a little bit of a fuzzier one, but it also goes to an EPD line supervisor of, whoever the involved employee is, their supervisor would take a look at it. And then if they find out more, like maybe this should be reclassified, they usually call me or Cindy calls me and then we talk about it. But if it doesn't get reclassified, we can close it out as an inquiry. Incident review is similar. It's usually a slightly more potentially serious allegation. So it's, I saw a use of force that looked like, for instance, an example would be like, I saw a use of force. It looked like perhaps they were using force after the handcuffs were already on, right? And that would be a clear violation of policy. So we might put it as an incident review at first because maybe the person was far away and didn't get a really good look, right? And so we want to know more before we go into a full-blown investigation, but we definitely need to take a deep look at it, and probably with IA, right? So that would go to an internal affairs sergeant. They look at everything they can look at up to interviewing the involved officer. At that point, once they've done all that preliminary investigation, they confer with us, and then we either sort of reclassify to an allegation of misconduct, or sort of go downward. We can go downward to an inquiry or service complaint, or we can close it out as an incident review. It kind of depends. So that's kind of the fuzziest one. That's a newer classification that I think we came up with in Cindy's gonna know because Cindy always knows, but I think it was 2019, maybe 2018. And then the two most serious kinds are allegations of criminal conduct and allegations of misconduct. If there's an allegation of criminal conduct that needs to be investigated by police agency. So typically what we'll do is we put it into the system and then we have a conversation and then talk about who would be best. We like it when outside agencies do our criminal investigations because it's a lot cleaner that way. As with any other criminal investigation, it would go to a district attorney for review, and then they can determine whether or not to go forward with a criminal prosecution. If they don't, then typically we'll follow with an internal investigation to see if any policies were violated. And so that would be an allegation of misconduct. So that's the final thing we're going to chat about as far as classifications. But an allegation of misconduct is when we do an internal affairs investigation into the actions of an officer or officers. It's conducted by internal affairs with our participation. We confer with them about investigative steps, about who to talk to, questions to ask. We participate in those interviews with the involved employees, with witnesses. We collaborate. We have a really collaborative outlook on how we do those investigations so we can ensure that they are thorough, fair, and as unbiased as possible. And then at the close of those, we make a recommendation to the chief on how that should be adjudicated, whether or not the involved employee violated policy or not. The chain of command will also make a recommendation to the chief, and then the chief gets to decide, be the final decider. So, and then if there is a sustained allegation of misconduct, that would go into a disciplinary process that our office is excluded from per ordinance. So we don't get involved in that part. So when CRB, for instance, is looking at these things, typically they look at allegation of misconduct investigations that are closed, and then we sort of cut it off at the discipline phase because they review everything that we've looked at. Sometimes it's a whole lot. Alan can speak to that. But there's body worn video, in-car video, police reports, dispatch records, radio traffic, interviews with we record our interviews with the employees and with the witnesses, and we give all of that to the CRB for their homework every month. And then they come and talk about it. So last year, back to our numbers, so you can kind of, sorry, your lovely faces are covering up the side of my screen, so I'm just going to move you. But so you can see our 5-year trend, and you can see it grows. And last year was, even though we had fewer complaints, we had more complaints that required a lot of investigation. So for instance, we had one allegation of misconduct that had, like, one investigation that had something like 30 specific allegations of policy violations. So that is how this is weighted, right? So if there's one complaint, but it had like that many things that we needed to look at, then it got more space in this graph. So you can see we had a super heavy workload last year. It was rough. Commissioner Lemons, do you have a question?
Yes, but I can wait till the end of your presentation.
Okay, I'm sorry. I keep doing that. Okay, thank you. Okay. So this kind of shows a little more. So this goes into the specific allegations of misconduct. So it's not just, one complaint investigation. They often can have, usually it's more like 2 to 5. It's not usually 30. But so we had the most type of, the most common policy violation that we looked into last year was a violation of the conduct policy. So you all have looked at or I think you're going to look at the 103, the code of conduct, and that's where most of these come from, right? There's a judgment section in there. There's a conduct section, unsatisfactory performance, expectations of supervisors. Like, a lot of these are in there. That's the policy I use the most. Use of force, use of taser, body worn video, those policies are definitely also ones that I look at. And then de-escalation is also common. Those are the biggest ones. And then, so these are the dispositions. So this is how many of those very specific allegations were sustained. So this is not that we had 60 some sustained complaints, it's that we had 60 some sustained specific allegations that may have been part of, I don't know, 10 to 12 investigations. I honestly don't remember. I'd have to look at it again. It's been a while. And then we still had some of these cases open at the time when this report was written. and when this slideshow was written. And I believe they're all closed by now. So that often, when Cindy comes up, she, if we have a discrepancy, that's usually what the source is that I wrote it, or one of us wrote it when we still had open complaints. So the cases, including criminal allegations, included 7 specific allegations that there was a violation of the law, and then additional related conduct, integrity, judgment, those types of things. And then those dispositions, we had 7 specific allegations that resulted in someone resigning. That doesn't mean 7 people resigned. I know it's hard to explain. It just means that out of however many criminal allegations that we had, how many investigations we had open that included criminal allegations, 7 allegations were resolved by someone resigning. I hope that makes sense. And Lindsay's here to help me if it doesn't. We'll come back to that, I'm sure. So as you can see here, this is just the allegations of misconduct, not the allegations of criminal conduct. We had 1 employee terminated, but that was a result of, I believe, 39 sustained specific allegations. 8 employees received documented counseling, 3 employees received suspension. You can see all of that here. So we are allowed to report on disciplinary trends. Just to answer any potential questions we have around this, we're allowed to report on disciplinary trends. We just aren't allowed to have input into discipline or obviously release that information because it's protected under public records law. So big issues in our office last year, or big projects that we worked on. The main one was the staffing change. It was very exciting to get Lindsay and Rob on board. I have wonderful support staff. Our administrator, Vicky, has been here longer than me and can handle anything. And Beatrice is the most active, engaged engagement coordinator that I've ever met. And I think she's amazing. So it's been nice to sort of fortify our auditing function, so I'm not the only one doing it. We supported the Civilian Review Board through, I believe, 9 or 10 meetings last year. I worked with the results and the findings of the ad hoc committee. I've reported back to council definitely once. As a result of the ad hoc committee work, I was asked to come to council and report in June on, oh my gosh, sorry, that's 2022. You guys. But in 2021, I was working with Jeremy to help support the ad hoc committee and do presentations and do some education pieces for that group, so they knew who we were, why we were existing, and all of that. I apologize, you guys, it's a long day. We continued our community outreach work. We are working on a public portal, and that is an ongoing project, but we have selected our vendor and we'll have it up and running by the end of this year. I'll talk more about that in a second. And continue to do our ongoing trainings for the CRB. Things we were working on, so accessibility, one of our main projects that we're working on for this year and next year is a community portal. And this is, so right now you can file a complaint online through our webpage, but I believe it was designed in 2007 and it looks like it. You can't actually get any updates on your complaint through our website. You call or we email you or we send you a letter. It's not efficient. So we were able to find a vendor who was actually coincidentally building a portal software, and they also are connected to our internal affairs database. So it actually worked out incredibly well, where they were developing a product was just exactly the product we were looking for. So we are working on implementation. We should have that up and running by the end of the year. But with that project, we'll be able to, you can file a complaint online. It can be anonymous. You can attach videos, photos, any other evidence you want. You can check on the status of your complaint. We can put letters in there for you. We can upload information back to you. So for folks who may not have a consistent address or a consistent way to reach them, as long as they can actually access the internet, then they can receive more information about what happened with their complaint. So I'm really excited about that. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have been working on I'm trying to secure a DEI audit of our processes to see where our gaps are. I think we have the good bones of a really good program, but I'm sure we have gaps and want help identifying those. We secured funding for a DEI analyst ongoing if that's something that we need as a result of the DEI audit, to make sure that our processes are inclusive and accessible and available to all of the folks in our community and not just the people who created the system in 2007. We're also working on relocating our office. I heard a lot of the discussion around downtown. We are on the ground floor in downtown, and it is become increasingly uncomfortable, and we've also outgrown our office. We have one employee who's working right now in the conference room, which isn't the best. So we found a new office at the Parkview building, and we'll be doing sort of an open house once we are fully moved in. We are not there yet. Continuing work on our core competencies outreach, which has been really actually fun to be able to go out to events and do some outreach again. And then ongoing collaboration and improvement in certain systems. So I've been working ongoing with trying to improve how we respond to deadly force and how we do deadly force investigations. We've had ongoing discussions with EPD about how to work on an early intervention system to give support to folks who look like they may need support before things go south. And then I'm continuing to work on the ad hoc committee recommendations. So I'll be going back to council in January, I believe, with sort of what I've seen in 12 years in the office and what I see as far as gaps again in our system and how those can dovetail with some of the recommendations of the ad hoc committee and make some recommendations to council on how to improve our process and our system. We have lots of gratitude, including to you fine folks. Thank you for inviting every year. Thank you for your thoughtful discussions on EPD policies. I am here listening every month, and if I hear anything that I feel like is pertains to me, then I tend to pipe up. But just know that if you have any questions about our office and our very capable CRB liaison can't answer them, please feel free to ask me because I'm typically here. And everybody else. We have central services staff helping us with all this fun moving and ISD purchasing and all of these things. So it's been a learning process. It's been a really interesting time. I do have the CRB's annual report, but it kind of goes into the cases that they reviewed last year and the trainings that they had. If you're interested, I can go into that, but I figured I would stop here. And then I believe I've got Sean, I think I've got a slide from Lindsay that I can show you. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment so I can find that. Talk amongst yourselves. Lord knows if I'll be able to find it. Oh, thank you, Lindsay. That's way better. Okay, so Sean, I hope that answers your question. These are the ones that we dismissed in 2021.
I did have a follow-up, if you don't mind, Scott. I know you've had your hand up for a while as well. So I'm not seeing the two things that I'm not seeing on here are Cahoots itself. When they came to give us a presentation, I asked if they had any internal way of handling complaints or taking complaints, and it seemed pretty bare to me, which was concerning. Obviously, you've done such a good job with EPD. You're my first thought to give all new problems to. And then private security, which we heard downtown is, I mean, whether or not we make it an official contract with EPD, it is increasingly a source that our community is relying upon. You know, my reservations notwithstanding on that one. And I also don't see any of them on here. Is that because you don't get any complaints, or because it's just liable to fall into agency unknown?
I mean, at this point, so I would say that means we didn't get any complaints about them in 2021.
Yeah.
It would not necessarily mean that we have never, ever gotten a complaint about them. And I'm not saying that they're widespread at all. Because I think if they were, we would have seen them in 2021. But I would say that, you know, I've been in this office for 12 years. And so I can recall receiving complaints about both of those entities, but it's been a long time. I should acknowledge that I'm just kind of old. So,
yeah, and I imagine it's not part of our outreach to say, hey, you can complain to us about these things. So that
right. We've got our hands full.
Okay,
A quick scan of
Commissioner Lemon?
2020 and 2021 show that we haven't received any complaints for cahoots or for private security.
Thank you, Lindsay. See, she's good. Thank you.
Commissioner Lemon?
Thank you, Chair. I just think that it's important to get on the record in a different way, because I absolutely love flowcharts. So thank you for showing us that one. But not everyone sees or can understand those flowcharts. So out of accessibility and transparency, I feel like it's important to get this on the record. Once a recommendation is made to the chief by your office, and let's just assume for this question that you're making a disciplinary and corrective recommendation, what happens internally and who is ultimately responsible for that decision?
Well, currently I don't make recommendations on discipline. I will make a recommendation on the adjudication. So it's kind of, it's hard to really conceptualize. So it's, we do the investigation and then we do the adjudication process really just looks at what did we find out in the investigation? Does it look like this employee violated policy? So that's the part where I make recommendations. So if we were in a situation where my recommendation is different than the chain of commands, like I think, yes, absolutely, this employee violated policy, and they say, nope, this is unfounded, this is unusual. Those are like the two biggest far apart things we can do. It goes to the chief, and the chief gets to look at our really well-written memos and then decide. And then the chief's adjudication holds. That's the one that is final. We're working through a process where there's a disagreement at the end between me and the chief, which actually doesn't happen all that often, but when there is, that he can come to CRB and have some discussion around that, because you know, there isn't really a structure set up for how to deal with that right now, not in the ordinance, but it is the chief who has the final say. Does that answer your question?
No, that absolutely does.
Okay.
I had a feeling that that's what it was going to be. I met you at the ad hoc committee a couple
Oh, yeah.
months. So the second one, I noticed that you were tracking a lot of different outcomes, but do you track and report if an officer is actually charged and arrested? And if so, did I miss that in the presentation?
That's a good question. It's rare, honestly, it's rare. So that's kind of why I'm hesitating to answer. And I'm trying to think through the cases last year. I would say typically once it's in the hands of the DA, I tend not to follow it because I mean, unless there's a situation where they're going to continue to be an employee, then I don't have the capacity to necessarily. But I think that's a really important question. And I think we could go back. I mean, Cindy can answer whether there's any spots in the database for that type of thing. I think there actually are. So Cindy might know better than I do if we have that information in there, and I've just neglected to go back and look at it.
And she comes on next, so you can ask her.
Yeah, I'm trying to get her all teed up.
Oh no, that's all good. I really appreciated your presentation. And then lastly, I am very familiar with the ad hoc report. I was wondering, before you make your final recommendations to City Council, are you gonna come back here?
I'm here all the time. If you want me to talk to you guys, I can. Yeah. I mean, I would say typically council likes it when I go to them first with ideas, but I would be able to come back to you guys after I've spoken with them and I could talk to you about how they receive them and all that stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So if there's a time in our agenda, that'd be great. If not, can I follow up with you over email?
Anytime. Yeah,
Awesome.
absolutely.
Thank you very much. That concludes my raised hand.
Commissioner Wynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Leah, this is a very informative presentation. Thank you for this. Regarding page 10, the flow chart that we're looking at, I was wondering, you know, because I was looking through there, I like Ian, I'm also into flow charts. And I was wondering, shouldn't CRB somehow fit into that flow chart? I don't recall seeing them on there.
Yes.
And they do play a very critical role in your work. right?
Yes.
So I was hoping to see them somewhere in the flow chart. Secondly, it's more of a language thing. It might just be, potato. But allegations, the very last category heading where it says allegations of criminal conduct, shouldn't it be allegations of criminal misconduct?
That's a good question. Well,
Yeah.
first let me answer the CRB one.
Okay.
So I should say there have been many iterations of this flow chart, some of them more readable than others. Some of them are completely unreadable. It's amazing what I can do. I have no graphic design background whatsoever. So at one point I had one that also included a community impact case process, and it just looked insane. Or it just looked too much. So I stopped. And what I will say is the CRB can review any closed case. So typically what they do is at a normal meeting, they'll review a closed allegation of misconduct. And then usually a one meeting per year, we give them a bunch of incident reviews, inquiries, service complaints, because I want their feedback on how those were classified and how those were handled as well. There's a lot of work associated with those, so we tend to do it once a year, but yeah, so they can, and then we also, I should mention, we do a closed case report every month for the CRB, so they can see every closed allegation and voice if they have an interest in looking at any of those, and then we move from there. So just to be clear about that. As far as I don't know, I feel in my head misconduct means a violation of policy, and criminal conduct is you did something that was criminal. But I hear what you're saying, and I have honestly never really thought about it, so I will noodle on that.
Yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Wimbrow.
Thank you so much for the presentation, and hi, Lindsay. It's a thrill to see your face again, and congratulations on the position. We're really lucky to have you at the city. And hi, Rob, even though I can't see your face, I remember you from the Citizens Police Academy and really excited to have you here as well. So my question is more for the chair, based on your comments of having potentially a DEI audit of the auditor's office. In December, I think we're having our quarterly DEI training, and it might befit us as a commission to have part of our diversity, equity, and inclusion trainings to look at the way that the EPD or the auditor's office does trainings themselves, just so that we have a meta understanding of not only how we incorporate diversity, equity, and inclusion to our own work with the police commission, but how interrelated bodies that do kind of ancillary policy work look at themselves through the lens of DEI, just to give us a deeper understanding of how we look at ourselves through this work, but also how bodies that help inform the commission's work kind of audit and look at diversity, equity, and inclusion work. So
Yeah, and I put a name down that could assist us when she brought that up in the DEI audit, and I put down Dr. Johnny Lake is more than qualified to assist us on that. So I would put his name down, and I would, if you need to get a hold of him, Holly has his contact info. He did a presentation for us. He's in the community. He's highly respected, and he can put us on the right track.
Yeah, he was great. He came to CRB. I cannot remember when. I'm so sorry, but no, he did a wonder. He's great, and I listened when he was with you all as well, and I think he's wonderful. So thank you for mentioning that.
Commissioner Lehman.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the interim auditor and to her staff. This was a year she's reporting on when staffing was a challenge and COVID and everything else. And I do hope that the city settles her position on certainty, however it settled it. I think we owe it to her as a community to deal with that. And I think they are moving that through their agenda. As a year on the CRB, and this is the only comment I'd like to share with my fellow commissioners, and that is the discipline outcome. So there is tremendous transparency. It is brilliant in the access that they give the CRB members to the complete investigative file. So we really are a check on whether both the internal affairs, the department itself, and the auditor are thoroughly examining these instances of alleged misconduct. The flaw is that it ends with we have no idea what sustained. We might see names more than once. We might see officers on things, types of complaints more than one, but you just have no idea what happens. And that's, I mean, to me, it's a flaw in the system, in the sense that if it's oversight and we want to know that the police are properly dealing with the internal discipline issues, then the slide you saw that showed the outcomes is the only, I could try to start to connect, but there's no way to know what happened to Officer X after it was sustained that they did, the fall, and so I just point out that, people don't always, not everyone understands that nuance, and it's just something that I hope, over time is addressed, that there's just no way of knowing what happens, but the process, the check on the process, I believe the auditor serves an important function, and the city is well served. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
Silver has a question.
Excuse me?
Chair Warner, Robert has a question. Silver has a question.
Yes.
Okay.
I can't see him on the screen, but
I
yeah.
think he's not, yeah. Silver,
Commissioner Mogart?
I think,
Is he? I see his hand now. Commissioner
Yeah.
Mogart?
Holly, you may be able to allow him to talk since he's on the phone. That might work.
I think he's in as a guest. We might have to change that one.
This is asked to unmute. We need you to unmute. Commissioner Mogart?
Okay, maybe. Is that any better?
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. I'll just do it this way then. So I had two questions for Leah. Is there a term limit for civilian review board members?
Yes.
Because I do see a lot of names that are on there and have been on there for some time.
Mhm.
And the second question is, you said that there's an internal process where if there's a criminal complaint against an officer, it goes to another agency. Can you tell us, for those of us who are new to the board or to the commission, that process, and what are the other agencies that that criminal investigation goes to?
Sure. So first answer, yes, there are term limits for the CRB. They are listed in ordinance. Off the top of my head, I believe every member is appointed to a 3-year term, and they are limited to 3 consecutive terms. That sounds right to me, but I can look that up and give you a final answer, Silver. And then for the criminal conduct complaints, so this is an interesting category because the behavior is criminal, it doesn't necessarily always come to me first, but EPD is very good about informing me when it does, because they know that I'm here and I have an interest. So typically, it's hard to say how they come in, honestly, because they come in all kinds of different ways. But if there is an EPD contact, for instance, one way it would happen would be there's an EPD employee who is contacted by another law enforcement agency or EPD in the course of doing something, right? And then that agency typically reports to EPD, hey, we had a contact with someone who works for you. And then the chief and the the deputy chief and I usually have a conversation of, okay, this happened. What do we do? So sometimes, like in that case, there is an agency who's already made contact with this person. They've probably already done an on-scene investigation. And so we let that happen. Another way it could happen, and I would say usually, it could be whatever law enforcement agency. This person could be on a vacation, right? It could happen in Colorado. It could happen in Springfield. It kind of depends. The other category, the one where we have more of a choice, is when there is something that occurs and it appears there may be a criminal element to it. I'm trying to think of a good example, but I guess here's one. Okay, so if someone is getting arrested and they say, I had $500 in my pocket, and when I got to jail, it was not there anymore, and it was not accounted for in any way, shape, or form. And then we can watch the video, and if we see, no, there was $500, and I'll go, like, sometimes we can account for it with video. If we can't, right, then the implication is that maybe there was a theft. So potentially what we would do is say, okay, there's potentially a criminal element here. So we can talk to OSP, sometimes Springfield, sometimes Salem. Sometimes it's based on if we know, like if the EPD command staff has a connection with someone who they know to be a very good investigator, that kind of thing. So it kind of is a case by case basis. And honestly, it's also influenced by if we have an agency doing a lot of these for us, then we try to spread it around, because it is essentially asking a very awkward favor. Does that make sense, Silver?
Yeah, so basically I wanted the other commission members to know that it is something that is dealt with by other law enforcement agencies, and it's not some open agency. It's other law enforcement agencies that are looking at this complaints.
And I should say, like, per ordinance and in practice, EPD is kept apprised of that. They are kept apprised of that criminal investigation, and they are really good at keeping me apprised as well.
And then your last question, Commissioner Dominguez.
I was just wondering looks like page 15, you said the group made several recommendations to the chief on EPD policy and practice, including, and that would be the CRB. I think, did you cover that in the presentation? I'm not sure if you did.
You're gonna,
but it's in the,
okay.
It's in the thing that y'all sent. Anyway, I was just wondering if there's a way to get that, like those recommendations, like that memo, or what is it? These recommendations were included in a memo from the CRB to the chief in compliance with the city ordinance on community impact cases. So it just seems kind of like useful for us to see and look at, like, because especially like here it says, one of the bullet points is several changes to the policy governing the use. Well, not that one. Well, yeah, sure. Several changes to the policy governing the use of 40mm sponge round launcher, including that it should not be used in crime control situations. Anyway, so several changes, like it's not, delineated here, but it would be nice to see like what it is that you're talking about.
I get that. Yes. So, and Lindsay may remember more than me, because I think that was actually a time when you were doing this work, that side of this work, I should say, because she's obviously still doing this work. But yes, I can look into that. I can't remember if it was one of those things that was sort of a public record at the time. One thing that I have been working on, or I've been wanting to work on, I should say, I should be more clear about that, is a full little report on how the community impact case was handled and investigated and the outcomes and all of that, because well, it's been a little while now, and it would be great to have that. And it was something I wanted to do last year, but with staffing, I couldn't. Now that we're actually all caught up on use of force reviews and shows of force reviews, I think maybe we'll be able to get there. But that would also be included in that. Those recommendations would be included in that report. Lindsay, do you recall if that was something that? Because I think that was the time when you were sharing recommendations to police commission. Is that right?
It was. I don't remember the specifics of the memo, however. I'd be happy to go back and look through my notes. And then, of course, anything that was written down would be public, so we can share it.
Yeah.
And just, I guess, just because during the last police commission meeting, we touched on this topic, just as a reminder to you, since you were going to look through your notes. One of your bullet points here is limitations on asking for mutual aid from agencies that lack accountability mechanisms such as civilian oversight. I think that'd be important for us to look at, just because again, we touched on it last meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then my final question is, let's see here, where'd it go? Oh, yes. So you all apparently did a bunch of cool trainings and such. The National Association of Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement webinar series. How do we get in on that? Like, can we?
Oh, yeah. So that's an interesting question. I think you can. So, so we're a member organization of NACOL, and yeah, and so I get all the mailings, but anybody I think can get all the mailings, and I can check in with Holly about forwarding some of those trainings to you all. That could be, I could totally see how that would be helpful. Dr. Michael Hames Garcia was in NACOL as well, and actually went to the conference in September. September is a terrible month for me, so I haven't been. But yeah, no, so sorry. I kind of think about there being a liaison here with that, and I realize that's not true anymore. So yeah, I can work on getting some of that information to you. I'm wondering if I could like umbrella you in under our membership, but I can check on that.
That would be lovely. Thank you. Yeah. I'm not saying that all of these we need to go to, but just some of them would be kind of cool.
Oh, come
So,
on.
it would, help us, I think.
Sure.
And in case anybody doesn't know, that was on page 21, some of the webinars. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so next we have Cindy Coleman. The leadership of the Police Auditor's Office is scheduled to appear before the Police Commission to discuss the 2021 Police Auditor's Annual Report. Traditionally, the Police Commission has invited the Police Auditor's Office on an annual basis to share the annual report. And that is the last speech. So let's go now for Cindy Coleman. The AIC's Professional Standards Manager, Cindy Coleman, will review the Eugene Police Department's Office of Professional Standards Annual Report 2021. Traditionally, the Police Commission has invited the Office of Professional Standards to share the Internal Affairs Annual Report, which includes the Office of Professional Standards, Policy Development, and Quality Control. So without further ado, we have Cindy Coleman. And we'll refrain from any questions until she's done with her report.
Good
Cindy?
evening. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
I don't see myself on the screen, so I wasn't sure if you could see me. So thank you very much for having me tonight. And I will go ahead and share my screen. Maybe that will work. Holly, can you confirm that I have access?
Yes, I show that you have access.
If we can't see her, we're not going to see her screen.
Yeah, I'm not seeing where I can even share my screen. I'm not seeing that.
Refer to a panelist.
Alt S. If you can.
What was that, Sean?
Yeah, so Alt S, holding the Alt key and hitting S is the hotkey for sharing. I don't know if you've enabled her with the right click, promote to co-host or whatever, but there we go.
There we go.
Got it.
Yeah, we have it. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Sean. Yep. You're live. You're on.
You might have accidentally muted yourself though while you were using the hotkey.
Make it bigger, Polly, go to the full gallery. No.
Cindy, Alt plus A to unmute yourself.
See it now. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry about that. Okay, so to introduce our team, we have two internal affairs sergeants currently, Ryan Nelson and Sergeant Joel Peckles. We have Rick Weber as our program coordinator, and he really is instrumental in keeping our office on track. And then myself as the manager. So this is just a quick overview of the stats for 2021 and how it compares to our complaints and commendations and the different types of complaints. Leah had already gone over the overview of how investigations are broken down by classification, but this shows for 2021, you could see that we had 43 allegations, 38 incident reviews, 254 of the supervisor actions, which are service complaints, policy complaints, and inquiries, and 330 commendations. This is a breakdown of our 10-year averages. So in looking at the data, you can see that in 2021, more complaints were classified at a higher level as allegations than typical, and we had less lower level complaints as supervisor actions. But on average, we had 25. We've been having, Leah had mentioned that we had incident reviews for a while, and we've had them since 2016. So we have had them for quite a while now. So the stats that I'm going to show now with some specificity are the allegations of misconduct and allegations of criminal misconduct. So in 2021, we had a total of 43 IA investigations, and this shows how they were broken down, and you can see that most were conduct complaints. Out of those 43 allegations, we had 22 that were sustained, and that includes both internally identified and citizen complaints. Again, out of those allegations of misconduct, there were a total of 111 total individual allegations that were brought against employees. And this shows the breakdown of how they were adjudicated. So 61 total were sustained. This will show you a breakdown by allegation type. So for each allegation of misconduct, we give it a general category of conduct, constitutional rights, courtesy, performance, respectful work environment, or use of force. You can see where most of our complaints landed in that conduct area, and we had quite a few that were sustained this year. We had 2 specific complaints that had a number of different sustained allegations in them. So again, this shows the allegations of misconduct where we had a total of 22 that were sustained. 13 of those were internally generated complaints, and 9 that were sustained were generated from an external source. This shows our, this shows our corrective action for the last 3 years. Again, we had a total of 26 corrective actions that had taken place. So the stats that I show are reported a little differently than the auditor's office, but they are in fact coming from the same database. But for us, if we have a case involving an employee that has a number of different allegations that are sustained and it results in a termination, it's going to be reported out as just one termination. We don't terminate an employee more than once. So that's what these stats show. Incident reviews. Again, incident reviews are a preliminary investigation that's normally conducted by an IA sergeant, and they are classified by the auditor in that way to better understand more about what happened, to help her identify if it could and should be classified as a formal allegation, if it could be more appropriately handled as a service complaint. But in this case, these 33 cases were classified as an incident review and then closed out that way. And again, 37% of those were conduct related. The next category or investigative type of work is the supervisor actions. Those include the service complaints, policy complaints, and inquiries. These were classified by the auditor, and 50% of those were service complaints. And a number of them were policy complaints, but a great number of them were inquiries, which could be just a question about what happened in an incident. This is a look back and comparing our inquiries, policy complaints, and service complaints going back to 2019, just to kind of show the trend. So you can see that we had a lower number of service complaints for 2021 compared to 19. But the other chart showed that we had, comparison wise, we had a lot more complaints classified as allegations in 2021. This is just a show that most of those service complaints are subclassified, and a great majority, 62%, were classified as performance. So in addition to the classification and the subclassification, a few years ago, we started recognizing that it might be helpful to have complaints broken down to and given an additional category to just help us track additional trends. So the current complaint categories that we have is COVID related, driving related, LECC reporting, which is the bias-based policing complaints that we have received, prohibited camping, and specifically prohibited camping and parking in the parks complaints, as well as the riots and protests. So this is how the 2021 cases were categorized. Again, not all complaints receive a category, but if they are in one of these categories, we indicate that. And we will continue to look for categories that make sense in future years too, to see if there's additional categories that would be appropriate to track. Of those bias-based policing complaints that we have been tracking since 2016, although I think 2016 was a partial year, we received a total of 6 last year. 3 were classified by the auditor as an incident review, and 3 were inquiries. We also track in our database for the department vehicle crashes and vehicle damage. And this is, I want to just remind the group that these are not all crashes, but we do track any kind of damage that happens to one of our fleet vehicles. And so we had 66 incidents as in 2021. This is just a breakdown as to where in the organization that's happening. Patrol was our lead, which is not uncommon because they do the most driving. 24 were determined to be not at fault or within policy, and we did have 11 that were at fault. Just to put that in perspective, I like to show how many miles a year that are being driven by our EPD employees driving fleet vehicles. Vehicle pursuits, that's also something that we track and monitor. We had a total of 3 in 2021, down a little bit from 2020. And the reasons that pursuits were initiated, one was a Dewey suspect, one was a stolen vehicle, another was suspicion of criminal behavior. Force response and use of force. So we, in 2021, we did start a different way of tracking our force responses. We included we started tracking show of force as well, which we'll get to in a minute, but These are the specific use of force incidents. And it's important to know for this year, we have partial year, we changed the methodology of who was doing the reporting. So it used to be that a sergeant would respond to the scene of a reportable use of force. They would collect all the information, do their investigation, and do the data entry into our system, reporting on that incident. And there could be more than one officer that used a reportable level of force. So that was all captured in an incident. We changed our methodology and started having each individual officer do their use of force reporting into our database. So our numbers are a little high, but I believe that is due to the more than one officer could be entering a report on the same incident. Factors leading up, active resistance was 60%. Attempt to flee 13, actually armed was 9%. 89% of our incidents resulted in arrest, and the average age of the offender was 33. Drilling down a little bit to specifically to taser deployment, we had a pretty significant decrease in taser deployment compared to 2020. There were 24 that were deemed effective and 10 ineffective, and that can be a number of different reasons, to include no probe penetration or the probe spread was too small. And then 12 were listed as limited effectiveness. That just shows that on a chart. Canine use, we had a fairly significant increase in our use of canine last year. We had up to 16. All 16 of those were deemed effective and within policy. And the reasons for the use were listed here as active resistance was 8, actually armed 1, attempt to flee 4, and reported and believed armed 3. This is an interesting chart showing trends for the last 3 years. And you can see these are these are not all of the force types used that we track, but these are the most common force types that are recorded. You can see the decrease in the taser. Takedowns went up a little bit. OC spray went up. Knee strikes down. Focus blows also were trending downward. And again, shows of force are something new that we started to track. And it's important to know that a reportable show of force is when one of these weapons is directed at a specific individual to gain compliance. So for the firearm pointed, it would have to be an officer specifically directing their firearm at a specific individual to gain compliance. It would not be with drawing the firearm and having it at a low ready. That's not a reportable show of force. But you can see that we had 78. And again, this is just a partial year for 2021. Reasons for show of force, reported or believed armed. Attempted to flee was 19, felony 14%, actually armed 13%. It's important to know that the effective rate for show of force is 87%. So that means the show of force was effective, and officers did not have to escalate in many cases to use force. Arrest data. Again, just to put into perspective the numbers on our reportable use of force and shows of force with all of the contacts that resulted in arrests for 2021. Here you can see it's a very small percentage, 2% of the uses of force compared to the arrests that were made. just some quick comparisons on the monthly average of use of force. So again, the average was 13 for use of force in 2021. Again, that number could be up a little bit due to the change in methodology of reporting. Complaints have gone down a little bit, and commendations also have gone down a little bit. Commendations. You can see here that some of the commendations we received are internally generated by other staff or by supervisors. We track that as well. But the rest are through are external. They're through citizens, and they come in a number of different ways. You can see that a number of them come through email. That's probably the largest track there. Commendation themes, they continue to remain the same. These themes have been pretty consistent for as long as I can remember. Citizens are reporting that officers or employees are tactful, compassionate, caring, and patient. They appreciate their efficiency, professionalism, and thoroughness of investigations, and find them helpful, engaging, and informative. We always look at every in IA case as well as service complaints that come in. We take a look at all of those and identify if there were performance issues that were identified by the supervisor, if there's training opportunities, or if adjustments need to be made to our policies or our practices. We do track that and make adjustments when appropriate for our policies. Driving. As you could see by that category that we added, pardon me, we had quite a few driving complaints, still are receiving quite a few of those. But the performance that we tried to identify, or the themes that we continue to send to our employees, is that a reminder to model safe and courteous driving. Citizens are paying attention and to their driving, and they don't appreciate if they see a violation by one of our employees on something that they would be held accountable for. And this would include the vehicle accidents or things that have come up and we track there. We want to remind them to make sure they've got a clear path of travel and drive with due care. Other performance things that come up just could be simply to remind them to check their email and respond to their email and their voicemail, providing good customer service. De-escalation techniques. If we identify a case, it might not be a rise to a policy violation that is formally investigated, but if supervisors identify that there was an opportunity to consider handling something different, they will take that opportunity and coach employees on that, as well as reminding about gathering information and managing the public perception of their actions. Customer service, it's just a reminder that we are serving the public, and the perception that they are portraying out in the community when responding to calls is important, and how important an offering an explanation to a citizen or a bystander when it's safe to do so can really go a long way and reduce the number of getting a complaint. There was a number of policies and practices that were updated in 2021. Many of those came through the Police Commission for your assistance and suggestions on how to frame these issues for the community. They included These here, I'm not sure exactly which ones that you looked at. I believe public assemblies and demonstration, civil disturbance, and probably bias, crimes, and arrests. I can't quite remember. I'm sure you do though. I wanted to point out that in 2021, we successfully were recertified through the Oregon Accreditation Alliance. We got our police accreditation. And this was quite a project. Sergeant Julie Smith was instrumental in coming in and pulling this together. And I mean, the work had been done for the 3 years, but she came in and ensured that we got our paperwork together and our compliance together to be recertified. So that was a nice accomplishment.
And I believe, did that have to do with the award she got to? Did she
Yes.
get an award? Yeah.
Yep, it did.
Thank you, Sergeant Smith.
Oh, and I also just wanted to point out, we also have an analyst in the professional standards office that primarily works with our lab and the evidence control unit to ensure that we are meeting the accreditation standards for the lab as well. And she's a value added position in our unit as well. And training highlights for 2021. The training unit did facilitate a full department training on a new taser platform, which is Taser 7. And they, in addition to that, they got 2 instructors were certified in a survival tactic class. I think they plan on getting more officers to attend and get certified this year. They've made improvements to the FTEP program, and they did evaluate a device called the Bolo Wrap that they opted not to utilize. But I wanted to point out that they're always looking at new tools to see if they make sense and would be value added. They opted not to do that one though. And then important to note that they continually provide emergency vehicle operations training, which impacts, of course, the pursuit policy and pursuit trends. They look at those, the forcible vehicle stop techniques, and as well as the defensive tactics training that they do. Whoops. So I know that was really fast. Leah's presentation covered many of the basics of the process. So, but let me know though if you have any questions at all.
It looks like I see a hand raised, so Commissioner Lemon.
Thank you, Chair. I don't intend to take too much. I have 3 questions, one of which might take about a minute. So the bigger question is, have you received any complaints about people calling for cahoots and EPD showing up instead? If so, are you tracking them, and are there any metrics on that? And do you want me to list all my questions now, or do you want me to go one by one?
We can do one by one, I think. So we have in the past received complaints about cahoots. But because they're not our employees, we don't necessarily do the investigations on those. But if we've received, oh, sorry.
Oh no, I'm sorry. Maybe I wasn't clear. I meant more of it, like, let's say a parent called for cahoots and then EPD showed up and there was a negative response. Is there anything along those lines?
Yes, we would track that as a complaint about the department. Yes, but in terms of, I don't have specific stats on that specific not responding for that reason. So no, sorry, I could.
Oh, no. I mean, actually, you explained most of them. Maybe I could follow up with email later. And then the quicker ones, and this was a question I posed to your colleague, but do you track officer arrests after they have quit or been terminated from the department?
No, as Leah alluded to, it's very rare that we would have an employee still in our employment if they were arrested and convicted, especially of a felony. They probably wouldn't be employed anymore. But we do track in the database all of our allegations of criminal and allegations that have been investigated. But we don't track specifically what's happened with the prosecution of an employee that has probably not employed anymore.
Okay, so basically, once they're out of your employment, then they're out of your purview.
Right.
Okay, and then my last one was on the show of force slide that you showed. You said or the slide showed that like 17% were unsubstantiated. I also noticed that 19% of show of force was on fleeing. I was wondering, does EPD have a breakdown of those, like the show of force and when they were used and why? And that's my last one. Thank you.
No, I don't believe we've done that analysis.
Is there a reason why, and do you hope to do so in the future?
So in terms of why we used a show of force?
Correct. Yes.
Maybe I'll get back to you and talk about that, because I'd like to know more about what you're trying to get at on that.
Okay, and in the interest of time, that's okay. So I will follow up with you with email too. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you.
Commissioner Lehman.
Thank you, Chair. Cindy, this is just an honest question for information. Are you a civilian employee or a sworn law enforcement officer?
I'm a civilian. I probably should have given some of my background. I have been with the department for over 27 years. I started my career in Office of the Chief as an executive assistant, but I've been in internal affairs in various positions for 21 years.
All right, thank you. And I just want to anecdotally tell the commissioners that in our CRB meeting this week, we investigate or analyzed a complaint that really would not have reached us and not have been part of the auditor process, except for Cindy reviewing daily entries into a lesser tracking system that the department has and noting that an incident was mischaracterized or in her belief, and she shared that with the auditor. And I just think that I want to commend Cindy for that, but also say that I think it's important that we have a civilian in the management position of the Internal Affairs Office. The two sergeants are very cooperative and work with the auditor, it appears, in a well-intentioned manner to get to the truth in these incidents. And I just think that was an example of having a civilian within the department, the auditor's completely separate from the department. Having a civilian in Cindy's position is important, and I appreciate it, and I appreciate her. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Dominguez. You're mute.
Sorry, I couldn't find my mouse. Okay. Oh, that's really cool to hear about Cindy doing that. Thank you. And just out of curiosity, that thing that you were looking at, was that the ADOR thing, the actual writing of daily observation reports? Is that what you were using to, flag that thing?
No, we have a separate database that is not linked to iPro that's called Make Note, and it is an electronic supervisor's working file. It is designed for routine performance issues that a supervisor coaches an employee on, or it's also used to track any positive comments that are coming in or good work that's done. It's so that they can, at the end of the year, check this program, and it's a repository for all the positive and negative comments, or even things like career development. A supervisor could add a note in there that about something that an officer wants to maybe pursue later in their career, and they could be looking for trainings. It's a supervisor's tool. There's some great features by when one supervisor takes over a team, they automatically get the notes related to their new employees. So the notes kind of go to the new supervisor. It's also transparent. When a supervisor adds a note to an employee's make note, the employee's notified, so they have visibility on the notes that are put in there. So anyway, we have had that, I think it was since 2015. And so it's a tool for supervisors in doing performance evaluations.
I'm just curious, so you're saying that the taser use is on decline, and I guess I'm trying to understand how well de-escalation training is working. And I guess I'm wondering if there's like a way to say it's just like, and maybe I couldn't understand the data that you provided, but essentially it's just like taser use is on the decline because de-escalation is on the uptick or whatever. Is that what's going on? Like, is there a way to kind of keep track of that? Like, do they tell you, hey, we use de-escalation and that therefore we did not need to use a taser?
No, I mean, if you think about it, what we're tracking are just the reportable shows of force and the reportable uses of force. So we're not tracking every time an officer engages with a citizen that they use de-escalation skills that resolve an incident, and those other forces are needed. De-escalation is used with every contact an officer makes. That is something that they do just routinely by various methods. And Sergeant Smith could probably talk about it in more detail, or the chief, because I am not an officer, but I know that training goes into every contact they have.
I guess I was just wondering if there's a way to keep track of like how effective de-escalation training is. Anyway, because that'd be cool to keep track of.
Well, I was just going to say, I think we will with some time, we'll be able to track the data on our shows of force. Right now, we only have, the 1 year, but over time, we'll be able to see how effective the reportable shows of force are being.
Okay, thank you. And my final question is, my understanding is that you updated to Taser 7, is that right? I guess what I'm curious about is so you didn't choose to go with the bowler wrap because it was like ineffective, and the previous Taser system had only like about 50% accuracy. And I guess I'm wondering, like, why did you update to Taser 7? What is it more effective or something, or what is it doing? Why?
No,
Maybe you can answer that one. I'm not an expert on that.
So in all of our worlds, we have pieces of technology that which is a brilliant business plan to create technology that has a shelf life or comes to end of life, or you cannot get maintenance on it. This is nothing more than Taser having their next generation of product, and the prior product was at end of life or not being supported. And so it's a brilliant business model. It's the same with our bulletproof vests, for instance, which technically, quote unquote, expire after 5 years. So we have to buy a brand new vest for people every 5 years because they're expired. So this is less about efficacy with the new platform and more about the big machine of Taser International coming out with a new model and shelving their old models.
Planned obsolescence.
Yeah, basically, it sounds like it. Okay, well, that's too bad. Thank you.
Commissioner Wynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize, Cindy, if my question is kind of redundant to what Bonnie had just asked. But anyway, I'm wondering, regarding the stats for the complaints, if there are any correlations to the, increase between 2020 to 2020, to 2019, that comparison. And then you see this increase in 2021. Sorry. And then there was an increase in 2021. And then, so we're in 2022, so that's not out yet. So I'm asking because I recall that during early part of the COVID-19 pandemic, that there was a scaling back on routine traffic stops. Did I remember that correctly? Due to safety for the officers and for the department, there was, the scaling back on, typical traffic stops that are not endangering the public per se. Yeah, so I really enjoy data and all that, but I'm just kind of wondering if there are any correlations or if you have any idea why the numbers dropped this recent cycle. Any thoughts on that?
Could you clarify if you're talking about the number of complaints that have dropped?
Yeah, overall, because I think what Bonnie had said was, more in regards to tasers and all that. But I'm asking as an overall question, which would, include service complaint.
Well, my perception is that it sure seemed like we've been just as busy as we always have been in our office with the numbers of complaints. I don't really see that the number of complaints changed drastically as much as I do believe that they were classified a little differently than historically. We have a different auditor. Leah was started in February of 2021. So she's responsible for the complaint classifications. So what I saw from the data is that we had more complaints classified at a higher level in 2021 than we typically had historically, but we had higher service, and lower service complaints. But I think the number of complaints have remained fairly static and still fairly high from my perception historically.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I ask because number is numbers, you can have all the numbers in the world and, what does it do, right? Except, just looking, great on paper or not great on paper, but I guess what I'm trying to understand is, what's the cause for the increase or decrease in certain categories? Yeah.
Well, we certainly did have in 2021. What we did have is we had a couple of really significant cases that had a lot of different allegations associated with it. So I think that shows up in our stats if you look at the number of sustained allegations. But in terms of overall numbers, I feel like generally speaking, it's been pretty consistent. They just were classified maybe a little differently this last year.
I think one of the things that happens when we have this conversation, you guys, is that we start thinking about these allegations as individual people. And that's not the case. Cindy alludes to one employee that I terminated, that this individual person generated upwards of 30 different allegations, all of which, by the way, were internal. So no effect externally to the community. It was all bad behavior to this individual's teammates. And so that has a tendency to create a little bit of a strange year, and it's definitely not the norm to have a single person generate 30-ish so different allegations. Leah's allegation memo was pages long of trying to wrap our arms around the stuff that this guy did to our fellow employees and the way he treated them. So that's probably what's monkeying with the numbers a little bit, V.
Okay, thank you so much.
Just an effort that we stay within time, we're gonna do the last two questions. Senator, not Senator, well, one day maybe Senator. Commissioner Dominguez and Commissioner Shivers, y'all have the last two questions. And then we'll be going to our closing statements. So Commissioner Dominguez?
Just real quick, sorry, I'm like harping on this, but so in the 3-year trend of use of force, it looks like focus blows, knee strikes, and taser use is going down. And I guess what I'm wondering is it okay to say to the public that de-escalation is actually taking over? Like if you read this document, it's saying that like more new officers are being trained, and it's like and because new officers are being trained in de-escalation, that's why the numbers are going down. And it's not so much like older officers. So I guess I'm just wondering if I can say, if somebody asks, de-escalation is working. We could see it in the last 3 years that it has been working. That's why the numbers are going down. And it is because new officers that are entering are usually the perpetrators of force, and it is decreasing. Can I say that? Because it kind of looks like that.
Be the chief. That'll be the chief's answer.
I don't think it's a bridge too far. I think that the piece that I think you can say, Bonnie, is that, you know, EPD continues to be consistent year in and year out with the types of calls they respond to, and encountering individuals that are resisting and or have some level of response, a negative response to us. And so by virtue of those numbers going down, something else is working. Something else is working, and what that something else is, I'm not sure we've captured that something else is. Could you say that in those instances where otherwise a knee strike, takedown, taser would have been used, that de-escalation training or the de-escalation has been effective? Maybe, but it's hard to quantify that without having those statistics. But you know, it's definitely trending in the right direction, which leads me to believe that officers are resolving things. It's not like we're resolving fewer things. Officers are resolving things at a lower level response, which I think is a success.
If there was a way to kind of quantify that, I don't know how you'd figure that out, but if there was a way, I think that would be really good for EPD perception. And then just the quickest thing, pressure point, was that an experiment? I saw that it was used one time and it was not effective. I was just curious if that was a experiment.
Pressure points are a specific technique that has been around for as long as I've been in law enforcement. It's been around for 50 years, especially the last 32 years I've been doing this. And it involves having to get pretty up close and personal with individuals. And so it's not widely used. But it can be effective if used correctly. There's different pressure points in your body that help gain compliance. And so it just is not one of those things that is used very widely.
Thank you.
Commissioner Shepard?
Yeah, I just wanted to speak directly to some of your questions, Bonnie. I think Chief is obviously saying it very well. I think the danger of saying like de-escalation is working is that if the numbers go up next year, which I would expect them to in sheer numbers, because our population is bigger, because we have more officers responding to more calls, because of, you know, the vagaries of that, you'd have to do this extremely elaborate statistical analysis with number of stops, you know, number of calls, and not just like number of complaints, but like the severity of complaints as well.
Okay, thank you.
So what I like to say in that situation is I am really glad to see that there has been less damaging force used, which that's what I'm seeing in the numbers. And I think that's a great way of communicating to people who might be concerned, like, hey, we have new officers. I expected them to run into more problems. Right now, there's some like low level service stuff, but I haven't seen the kind of spike in force use that I was afraid I might. So happy to talk more about, framing some of these questions anytime, but
Thank you.
thank you.
All right. We're now going to be entering closing comments, and we will start off with you, Vice Chair Dominguez.
Well, basically, I guess, hopefully I hear back from Lindsay about the recommendation that she had about bringing in different agencies into Eugene to help. And that's all.
Great. Commissioner Wynn? Closing comment?
You're muted.
You're muted.
1 second. Sorry about that. So I just wanted to share a little bit about the outreach we did in July a few months ago. We partner up with the auditor's office. I had the opportunity to work with Beatrice from the auditor's office. We set up the tent. I think that Bonnie, you were there. Dallas, you were there as well. It was really hot, really, really hot. I wish I had a tank top on, but I didn't. And one of the things that I mentioned to Chair Bogg is that we need some outreach materials. We don't have any except for the photocopied brochure that we use. We can sure use some pens. We can sure use some, something to draw people to our table. But it was overall, I think I can't speak for folks who came after, but the time I was there, I felt that there was some interest that people walked by. I wish we had the recruitment brochure to give out, but we don't. We didn't at the time. Now we do. So yay! Next year we definitely have something to hand out. So I just wanted to share that with you. For those of you who weren't able to make it, I hope that next year when we have more in-person outreach, that you're able to participate. Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Mogard? Severio? Okay, Commissioner Shivers?
I'm here.
ahead,
I'm
Silver.
just trying to
Oh, you're
get,
here, okay.
figure out
Yeah,
which application to use to speak.
No problem.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yep, okay. I want to thank the police auditor for coming out and speaking and giving us a report. And I want to give my apologies. I had to pick up my wife at the hospital, so I was late. My apologies. See you guys next month.
Thank you. Commissioner Shivers?
Yeah, so I will be late to next month's meeting. I have a de-escalation training for work, so I should be half an hour, maybe 45 minutes late. So apologies in advance for that. I also wanted to thank Lindsay for coming prepared with those numbers on the outside agencies who are generating some of the complaints that we're seeing. And I am excited to see that trend as we have a robust transparency for the area, whether they want it or not.
Thank you. Commissioner Ye.
Oh, thank you. I just want to thank Lindsay and Rob, our new folks, for coming tonight. Hopefully we'll get to interact with you guys some more as we go forward.
I'd like to make a quick motion that we extend the meeting by 4 minutes.
Second.
Thank you. The meeting will extend for 2 minutes. Commissioner Lemon?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I wanted to thank the presenters and thank EPD for being so transparent. I really appreciate being able to see internal affairs and stuff along those lines. I do have two concerns that I would like to see addressed in the future that came out of the last presentation. One is that that one person that created 30 internal complaints. I would imagine, and I can't not imagine that that did not affect the public as well, but I don't think the public has as much access to like lodge complaints or feel comfortable enough to do so. So I would like to see more investigation on that. And then secondly, and more importantly, I have a big problems with this planned obsolescence of bulletproof vests and tasers. That is just robbing our city and it is robbing our officers of safety. We all know the strength of the police union. We also know that it has a very bad rap. I think that that might be a place where the police union can flex their muscles for safety and for cost savings with the city. So thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing you all next time.
Thank you. Mr. Winbrow.
Just wanted to say thanks so much to the Police Auditor's Office and the Office of Professional Standards for coming out tonight. Really appreciate your work and your presentations.
Commissioner Lyman.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I also want to thank our presenters this evening. And this was our first meeting since the Worlds. And I just wanted to thank EPD. I don't know if the chief's still there, but that was a definitely time of heightened risk for our city. And it seems to have just gone really well. And a lot of planning went into that. And I just think it's appropriate to acknowledge that when there's good things that happen. So thank you, and we'll see you all next month.
Great. And I have to report that we had I orchestrated a Black professional meet and greet at the Graduate Hotel a couple of weeks ago. And we had well over 100 Black professionals from Eugene and Springfield that attended. We had an opportunity to have Ibrahim Coulibaly speak about what people do if they feel discriminated against, and about reporting those type of crimes and so forth. We also had the president of the NAACP, Miles Pendleton, speak and let people know that the things that his office can do. We had some dignitaries in attendance. We had the president of Lane Community College was there, Dr. Stephanie Bulger. And I do these things once a month. It also helps people connect with others and give people a sense that they're not alone in Eugene. Then, last but not least, I was on television this morning at 8:45 talking about the Real Men Wear Pink. I was in first place at the television interview, but I got passed while I was speaking by the number 2 person. So I'm now at number 2. I represent the Eugene Police Commission. We're doing a great job. Tomorrow I have an event where I will pass them again. And it's going to be at Bangers and Brews. And that's right across from Sheldon High School. The restaurant, I know the man, 20% of all the earnings will go towards my Real Men Wear Pink campaign and my numbers. Thank you for spreading the word. Do whatever you can. The things that I try to tell people is that one of the major things that we're doing right now is dealing with transportation issues, like getting people to and from their appointments. Obviously, we're raising money for research. We're obviously raising money for people to do early prevention type measures, as far as get your mammogram. But all the research and all those things don't work if you don't get the person to the appointment and back home. So that's one of the major things that we're doing. So thank you for your support, and that completes.
Counselor Ye.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, she spoke.
Oh, no, I'm just too wiggly.
No, I'm not bad.
Say in closing comments.
Yes, you have something else?
No, I don't.
No, she already did. No, she was.
Thank you, though. I appreciate you.
She was before.
I
Councilor.
saw you kind of moving over there.
Yeah, I do that.
So everyone, thank you so much for the meeting. Look forward to our next meeting, which is, what date is it?
It will be in November 10th.
November 10th. Thank you for your time and good night.
Always good to see y'all.
Bye-bye.